Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with another story. In this video, a woman ends up facing a guy that stalked her for ages and she teaches him a lesson. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, Insane Neighbor Went Too Far. Posted by user thefoxtrot86 on our own subreddit r/ripe stories. The person I ran into in this story was a neighbor of my best friend's aunt, close friend. But it scared the ever-loving crap out of me and I was decompressing for days. This happened about a month ago. I just fixed up my best friend's bike after it sat unused in a shed for 2 years. He stopped riding for genetic health reasons, but his treatment has made him much better. His bike is a very nice full suspension MTB with 29-inch wheels and 21 speeds. It is a beast. It needed some general lube, a derailleur cable and a cleaning, but it was actually pretty easy to get back on the road, and he's been riding it to work when the weather is good. And well, I fixed the bike, but returning it was a bigger hassle than it should have been. He wasn't at home when I initially went to town. And I could not leave the bike in his yard or driveway because it could have been easily stolen. So the bike remained in my truck all day while I ran my errands. My friend and I agreed to meet at his house at a certain time and I went there on the mark. But he was not home, so I called him repeatedly until he finally picked up and he told me his aunt made him go help her friend move a couch and then begged for my help. I was tired and just wanted to go home. I knew exactly where he was because on another day I was paid to deliver 2 couches to that house. But both couches were just put in the driveway and covered with tarps. I arrived, but I had to park a few houses down because my friend's aunt's car was in the driveway. My friend came out and told me to park half a block down the street. I was not in a good mood and I was basically looking down at my feet as I was walking because I just wanted this over with. And then I accidentally walked into the wrong house. That's my fault, but I was not very familiar with the area and my friend told me to just walk right in after I parked. I entered and asked where my friend was and was met with half a dozen people staring at me with shock. Then this guy who was a walking stereotype comes stomping over yelling, "What are you doing in my house?" I looked out the door and realized my mistake and started profusely apologizing, but this guy kept coming at me. He was shirtless, had both a mullet and mustache and was trying to look tough while charging at me till he was just 2 feet away from me. His fists were balled up and he was aiming to take a swing at me. I tried to explain what happened, but this guy just wanted to attack no matter what I said. And when I just barely managed to get out the door, he told me I was lucky that I was still standing in the most threatening way he could have said it. I told everyone in the house that I was supposed to enter what happened and they told me that guy is crazy and always has been trouble. Then I had to help move an old couch out and a semi-new one in. And that was a nightmare in itself, because nothing had been cleared out, the walkway was covered in plant overgrowth and the front door was too small because it was an old manufactured home. Then finally I made my friend get in the truck so we could finally unload his bike and lock it in his shed. And I told him I don't want to go back over to that street again anytime soon. Funny thing is though, if that guy had attacked me, by Oregon law he might have been the one getting arrested. I was a non-threatening intruder who walked in by mistake and was apologizing for it. In Oregon, if you harm a non-threatening intruder, your ass could be grass. And by the way, Ripe Stars, am I getting this wrong? Or did OP potentially walk into a crack den or something by mistake? That guy was absolutely out of control. Anyway, and if you shoot an actually threatening intruder, your ass might still be grass. One guy was tried for murder because he shot a threatening intruder and said intruder died. It was some technicality of, get this, the threatening intruder walked into the wrong house. How ironic. And the next one is the title story. It is titled, I Shot My Stalker, Am I the A-hole? For the past 6 months, I've been relentlessly stalked and had threats against my life made from someone I dated for a month. It started with phone calls, upwards of 45 to 50 a day, 50-page text messages and him showing up outside my house at 5 AM. When I would not comply or feed the negative attention, I began to receive threats, claims that he would murder me and get away with it. All he would have to do is flee the country. Telling me he shouldn't have to force me to be his friend or give him another chance or else. Every time I blocked his number from contacting me, he would then call me from different ones, try and pretend to be other people, or have his friends or sometimes even random strangers he would ask on the street. I once scared an unsuspecting guy half to death after informing him that the person who had just told him to call me was actually stalking me, and I sent him proof. He ended up calling the police on him. He fled, of course, but after about 2 months of that, I was evicted from my apartment building due to my neighbors no longer feeling safe because of his looming presence. I then applied for and was granted a TPO. A few days afterwards, I received a picture message of the note the sheriff civil had left on the door of my stalker's then residence with a message taunting me that what you're trying to do was stupid and a restraining order is just a piece of paper. So ultimately, he just ended up avoiding the process server, and simple as that, I was not being protected at all. May 31st of this year, I relocated. This did not deter my stalker though. He vowed to find wherever I moved to and threatened that if he couldn't find me, he would be able to find my family, and then proceeded to send me a map of my mom's home whom he had never met. I received a message from a woman claiming to be my former landlord, letting me know that I owed a balance on my account, and to avoid late fees I needed to pay the amount, which I could do with the link provided in the message. Turns out it was my stalker pretending to be a woman, and the link turned out to be a tool used to grab the user's IP address when they click the link. Upon this discovery, I changed my phone number and began to systematically dismantle any trace of an online presence I once had. This action only seemed to anger him, and before deleting the profiles outright, I would attempt to block him from contacting me. Each and every time I blocked one, he simply created a new one and proceeded to contact me as if nothing had happened. 12 different Reddit accounts, 9 different Tumblrs, 10 different Instagrams, 3 Meetup accounts, 4 Facebooks, with which he changed his location to that of my hometown and proceeded to add nearly everyone from my graduating class in high school, and even 3 Duolingo accounts and MySpace. Yes, MySpace. I then received an empty package from him addressed to my former residence with the declaration, "Address correction requested, don't forward." I'm assuming he thought that the post office would adhere to his requests and return the package to him with my new corrected address on it. Well, mid-July he created a profile using my photos and likeness to threaten my family, and when I didn't respond he proceeded to post semi-nude pictures of me on the profile in an attempt to blackmail me into speaking with him. Well, I didn't, and I contacted Twitter to report the account and have it removed, which they eventually did. I awoke around 8 PM to vigorous knocking and ringing of my doorbell. I look out my window to see who it is, and I was horrified to see my stalker there. I called the police, and of course he fled once again, with over 7 separate police reports filed. And by the way, just to quickly interject here, props to OP for filing all these police reports. Other people might not have contacted the police. Anyway, this incident was followed by threatening emails from my stalker demanding that I meet him somewhere, or because he had found me that next time I would wake up to gunshots, and that if I did not, he would first taser me and then assault me. And by the way, that sentence was so graphic I would rather not post it on YouTube. Anyway, this past Sunday night I woke up at 6:45 AM to the ringing and banging again. I proceeded to record him on video while I was on the phone with the police. He fled on foot once again, and I was hit with the same hoopla from law enforcement. Well, we cannot really do much, because technically at this point he's not doing anything wrong. Then why does he flee, I wonder? I obtained a TPO again, but I have no solid address for this dangerous person, which is why I am in dire need of a private investigator to assist with finding said residence so this person can be served. I hope you might be able to refer me to someone who might be able to assist me. I've developed insomnia, depression, anxiety, and paranoia. I'm completely isolated. I'm 22 years old and I have no social life anymore. I have no friends. I've become a shell of my former self. I've faced eviction and lost a job because of this man's behavior, and I don't know how much longer I can survive. There's actually so much more filler crap that he has done to terrorize me, but for the sake of this already lengthy post, I tried to condense it. I have proof in the form of recordings, event diaries, and copies of all of his threats, interactions, and attempts to communicate, and would be more than willing to email them to show that I'm not lying. I am in LV if that helps at all. Relevant comments: can you post a video? OP said, yes, but I'm on the phone with the police during the video. I'm not 100% sure how to blurt out certain info like my address and my phone number from the audio in the video. Then a commenter said, damn, I remember talking to an old friend of mine from Vegas who was saying she will get a CCW soon. I kinda think I should forward this to her. Soon just does not seem soon enough. OP then responded, "Do it, my gun saved my life." Update to the story: I'm writing this staring at the mess the police left for me in a bit of a fog. After 6 months of stalking and threats against my life, my stalker finally snapped and decided to kick my door in and make good on his promise. Out of fear, the past month I'd begun sleeping with a chair propped up against my front door to give myself a few extra precious seconds in case of emergency. I shudder to think how differently things might have turned out had I not barricaded the door. I awoke around 1:15 AM to the sound of the door giving away after one kick, followed by the sounds of my stalker struggling to dislodge the chair while forcing his way inside. I jumped up and grabbed the gun. I've learned to do everything, even shower with. I stood at the top of my chairs and fired twice. Hitting him in the chest, I hear his scream, his disbelief that I'd stood up for myself. 0 to 100 in milliseconds. I've never been so afraid in my life. I don't know if he's living, but I do know the police have him, and that is what helps the most. For months of him evading the police, I began to question whether he was unstoppable, untraceable, Houdini, he would murder me and get away with it. As of now, I'm in a haze of guilt, surprise, relief and disbelief. I shook as the cannons drag him out from his hiding place under a bush. I survived where so many people do not. Holy crap, I survived. And here is some more info from an interesting news article. A woman shot her stalker after he kicked in her back door. She had been living in fear, showering with a gun and propping a chair up against her door for just this sort of situation. Her post to Reddit made the story go viral. She writes, "I'm writing this staring at the mess the police left for me in a bit of fog. After 6 months of stalking and threats against my life, my stalker finally snapped and decided to kick my door in and make good on his promise. Out of fear, the past month I'd begun sleeping with a chair propped against my front door to give myself a few extra precious seconds in case of emergency. I shudder to think how differently things might have turned out had I not barricaded the door." OP then further said, "For the should have fired a warning shot folks in the thread, there are no warning shots, a gun is a deadly force, you only pull that trigger if you are in fear for your life and all other methods of deterring are gone. When he kicked my door in, there was no longer a deterrent preventing harm, warning shots are dangerous and could hurt the unintended. This is not a Wild West movie, that is what responsible gun ownership is." And yeah, ripe stars, I would 100% agree with that stance. However, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP did the right thing here? Or should she have done a warning shot? But to be honest, even as someone who's not from America, I know that you should never do a warning shot or something. I've heard that plenty of times already. Apparently no one would ever suggest that, so that people actually suggest this on Reddit is kind of wild. Anyway, now we have an update to the story and it reads like this. This is basically 6 years after the original events, but it's the same man. He did this to a different woman in 2019 while on parole. They refer to OOP as the former girlfriend in Las Vegas, even though she only went on 2 dates with him. The article goes like this. A Nevada man has been sentenced to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to stalking a female acquaintance while on parole for a similar crime that happened in Las Vegas. The district attorney's office in Reno announced the sentence for 20-year-old Douglas Eugene Jackson on Friday. He was arrested in Florence, Arizona in January and pled guilty to the aggravated stalking charge in July. According to prosecutors, an investigation by the Sparks Police Department determined Jackson had sent numerous threatening messages to the woman over several months in 2019. The text included threats against the woman's dog and property, and he also called the woman's family and friends in an effort to get information about her. At the time of the threats, Jackson was on parole for stalking a former girlfriend in Las Vegas. That woman ended up shooting him at her home. And yes, the woman the article is talking about was of course OP, who wrote the Reddit thread earlier. According to the district attorney's office, the prosecutor sought a maximum sentence because of the terrifying nature of Jackson's conduct, which came after only a month on parole for the previous crime. Jackson was living in Washoe County at the time of the threats but had no steady address. And yeah, ripe stars, with this I would say we have reached the ending of the story, and to be honest there have been quite a few further updates to the post and the thread on Reddit, but it's mostly comments coming from the original OP, apparently posted on TikTok, and in my opinion there's just too much personal information about her. Since I'm not a true crime channel, I don't want to cover this in too much detail and give too much personal information away. If not, necessary. You know my stance on personal information and privacy and stuff, so I think you will understand. Anyway, this was absolutely a totally outrageous story, and as usual as it is with cases about stalkers, I am just flabbergasted by the police response. At least the response at first. While it does feel satisfying that this piece of trash got shot, it shouldn't have come to this in the first place if the police had done their job and taken OP seriously. Let me know what you think about this story in the comments. Honestly, I'm still terrified after reading this. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I am a single woman who purchased an adorable, quaint home for my single self a few years ago. I had always been neighborly and nice to those around me, as all of our homes were very close together. I felt that keeping things cordial was always the best thing to do with those who lived around you. But that does not mean that every neighbor has the same idea as me, meaning being a douchebag for no reason is totally fine. When I first purchased the home, there was a very small iron fence that seemed to be indicating the property division between my home and my neighbor to the east. For the first year that I lived there, everything was good and there was never an issue, but then my mother became sick and required more of my time and attention than usual. This meant that I was not as thorough about my yard upkeep, especially in the back. I would still keep the grass cut, but the bushes and other small shrubs that were on the eastern side of my garage grew a little out of hand. It was never my intention to allow for the bushes to become unsightly, but I was simply distracted for several weeks during the spring and summer. I knew that my neighbor who was adjacent to that side of my property would be a stickler about the overgrown shrubs, so I made sure to send him desserts and other nice things to try and make up for it. Only, he never really cared for my gifts and asked me when I was going to take care of the backyard, to which I responded, "I'm doing my best." Well, as you can imagine, that did not please him much. About a week later, he started the process of building a fence, a big one at that, around 10 feet. I knew that it was to spite me because he had lived here a long time and never put up a big-ass privacy fence until now. I was not sure how to approach the matter and just decided that if he wanted to be angry and extreme, that he could. That is until I realized that he had taken part of my property when he built the fence and even blocked off the side door access to my own garage. I should probably explain the way that our neighborhood is set up so that you can get a good idea of what is going on. All of the homes are smaller and built close together. It is pretty typical for most property edges to be touching, and sometimes neighbors share very small portions of a driveway or an alley to get to a garage. These easements between properties are pretty common here. However, what my neighbor has done is in no way, shape or form legal, but I'll admit that I was a little worried since I don't know too much about property laws. That is when I decided that I probably should look into finding an attorney who can help me. Not having access to the side of my garage or the small portion that is blocked by his fence post was very frustrating and clearly inconvenient. Even though I was upset, I'm not the type of person to go out of my way to sue people, nor do I enjoy creating unnecessary drama, but in this case I was pretty pissed. On top of him building his FU fence, he was an absolute douchebag about staining the wood. I mean, it still had the lumber tags and writing marks on it. It honestly looked terrible, but he said that I was not allowed to touch the fence. I gave it one last try before really spending the money on an attorney to talk with him. I know that I don't have the best kept yard in the neighborhood, but I can tell you that this man sure does. One day I looked out a front window and saw him trimming his hedges with a small pair of scissors. So I went to talk to him one last time and he had the biggest sourpuss expression on his face. It was almost comical, but at the time it angered me even more. I tried to explain that I wanted to discuss the fence, to which he responded that the fence was within his legal boundaries and there was nothing to really talk about. When I mentioned the fence taking some of my property and blocking me from the side access of my garage, he only smiled and said that he was just taking the stress of the area off of my hands. When I told him that this was not what I wanted, he literally looked me in the eye and said, "Then sue me." Alright, I guess that tells me exactly what I needed to know. I finally reached out to the attorney I had been speaking with and started the process of suing his old grumpy ass. My lawyer did have me worried at one point during the process of gathering information. It almost looked like he could have a claim to adverse possession of the property because he used it frequently before I bought the home. Apparently he and the old homeowner were buddies or something. But thankfully, once I purchased the home with the established property line, including that area, we were golden. And he's only had possession of it for just over a month. Needless to say, court was simple and he was instructed to remove the fence from my property. Sure, the revenge was good enough there, but I wanted to take it a little further. While we were reviewing the property lines, his new fence was also about 3 inches onto mine. So I asked for the entire fence to be removed instead of just the area by the garage. The judge made a face like, maybe that's a little unnecessary. But it was still my property and she awarded it. It also broke the guidelines for legal fence height, which she agreed with. That weekend, he had a company out and removed the fence professionally, and the following day I started the process of putting up my own. It was definitely an FU fence from me. I made sure to tell him that with the crappy way that I was about him wanting to stain it. At first, I left it unstained and did not care, mostly to piss him off and get revenge for him doing the same to me. But I definitely planned on doing something heinous and ugly stuff with it soon, I just had not decided what yet. That is until my niece inspired me with her drawings. You see, I kept thinking that I needed to go out of my way to make the fence an eyesore to really annoy him. Staining it was not an option, that would look too nice, right? So instead what I did was I had my niece construct me a fun little picture of cute animals and flowers, and I would then convert that to something that I could put on the fence. I'm an artist and love to paint, so this was actually kind of fun for me. The best part was this thing was detailed and took me almost 2 weeks to finish, so he got to watch it the entire time that it was being painted. Some days he would watch me from his back door or kitchen window, and other days he would come outside with his arms crossed and the same sourpuss expression on his face. By the time that I was finished, there were 3 different cats with or without hairbows, several dogs, one being Clifford the big red dog, several birds, frogs and flowers. And you best believe that I did not make these animals the most attractive things. Some of them have to look a little special just for my happy and respectful neighbor to watch when he's angry or stare at them when he is doing yard work. He told me one evening when I was finishing up the fence mural that I was just wasting my time because he was going to paint over it anyway. When I told him, using the exact same words he used on me earlier, that if he touched my new fence with any paint, I would take him back to court and win against him again. Thankfully, that shut him up. Eventually, the paint chipped off after about a year, and I did not want to go out and redo it over again, so he got to witness my beautiful mural of animals as they all fell apart. Surely, that will even be more appealing. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.